Hello. So the goal for this lesson is to go over how to add rational numbers. So I have two examples here. I have one with decimals and one with fractions and mixed numbers. Let's take a look at our first example when we add with decimals. The first thing I'd like you to remember is that with decimals, you need to use the rules of adding integers. And we have our little song with the row, row, row your boat theme that talks about same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Take the sign of the farthest number, and then you'll be exact. And the second step that you need to remember when we are adding decimals is to make sure that you line up the decimals. So let's take a look at our first example. We have 2 3/10 plus, or and, a negative 1 7/10. Well, because I have different signs, I need to subtract. And so I line up my decimal points and subtract. I can't take 7 from 3, so I'm going to rename. 13 minus 7 is 6. Bring down my decimal point. 1 minus 1 is 0. So I get 6/10. If I think on a number line, which is farther, 2/3 is going to be farther. Number of spaces from 0, it's positive, so my answer will be a positive 6/10. Let's take a look at another example. This time, I'm adding a negative 2 3/10 and a negative 6/10. Because both of the signs are the same, I'm going to add and keep the signs. So I know my answer is going to be negative. So I need to line up the decimals, 2 3/10 and 6/10. And then I just add. 3 plus 6 is 9. Bring down my decimal point. 2 plus 0 is 2. Same signs, add and keep, they're negative. So my answer is a negative 2 9/10. If my rational numbers happen to be fractions or mixed numbers, I'm going to do things a little differently. When I add or subtract fractions or mixed numbers, my number one thing that I have to do first is take a look at the denominators. The denominators must be common. They must be the same in order for me to add or subtract fractions or mixed numbers. In this case, a negative 7/10 plus a negative 1 7/10 works out perfectly because I have the same denominator, 10. So let me go ahead and add this. I'm going to start by holding on to my whole number and ignoring it. So I'm going to add 7/10 plus 7/10. Because I have a common denominator, my denominator will stay 10. I add 7 plus 7, which is 14. Now I have an improper fraction, and so I want to rewrite improper fractions to be mixed numbers. So to do that, I'm going to divide. 14 divided by 10. I can get 1/10, and I'm left with 4. So I have 1 4/10. 1 4/10. Keeping in mind, this is negative because both of my fractions were negative. I can simplify my 4/10 by dividing by 2. So I end up with a negative 1 and 2/5. Now I want to go back up and remind myself of this negative 1 and tack that on. So I have a negative 1 and a negative 1. That's going to be a negative 2. And then I bring along my fraction. So my final answer is a negative 2 and 2/5. Let's take a look at two fractions, both positive. Here I've written the directions for adding rational numbers that are in fraction form. The first thing I need to remember is that I have to look at my denominators, and these have to be exactly the same. So if they're not, I need to rewrite using a common denominator. Remember, when I am writing common denominators, I'm looking for an equivalent fraction because I don't want to change the value of these. So whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. Then I'm going to add the numerator and copy the denominator. If it's an improper fraction, I'm going to rewrite it and or simplify. So let's take a look at that in action. First, I have the denominators 4 and 6. I want to find a common denominator that both 4 and 6 will go into. What I like to do is I like to look at the largest denominator, which is 6, and check if 4, anything times 4 will give me 6. No dice. So I'm going to think of the multiples of 6. 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12. So I'm going to see if 4 will go into 12. And it does. 3 times 4 gives me 12, so 4 and 6 both go into 12. 12 is a good common denominator. To get from 4 to 12, I multiply by 3. Whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator so it stays equivalent. So I have to take and multiply 3 times 3, which is going to give me 9. 9 twelfths and 3 fourths are equivalent. They're the same value. So I haven't changed the amount. Now, to get from 6 to 12, we multiply by 2. So that's what I have to do to my numerator. 5 times 2 is 10. So I have now completed step 1, rewriting using common denominators. Next, I add the numerator and copy the denominator. 9 plus 10 is 19. My denominator is 12. 19 twelfths is improper, so I need to rewrite that by dividing. 19 divided by 12, I get 1 whole number out of there, and then left with 7. 1 and 7 twelfths. I'm going to check and make sure I can't simplify 7 twelfths, and I can't. Then I'm going to make sure that I have same signs positive, so my answer is positive. 3 fourths and 5 sixths equals 1 and 7 twelfths. Let's apply that to one more example. In this instance, I have 2 sets of mixed numbers. Both of them are negative, so I know that my answer is going to end up negative. I'm going to hold on to those whole numbers and ignore them for a moment because I need to check out what my fractions are going to be like. Step 1 says you need a common denominator. So I'm going to rewrite those. I'm going to start by looking at my 7. Nothing times 3 gives me 7, so I'm going to go down the line. 7 times 2 is 14. Nothing times 3 gives me 14. So the next multiple of 7 is 7 times 3, and that's 21. 3 times 7 gives me 21. So my common denominator is going to be 21. Now I'm going to rewrite my numerators. To get from 3 to 21, I multiplied by 7. So that means I have to multiply my numerator by 7. 1 times 7 is 7. Next, to get from 7 times 21, or to 21, I multiply by 3. 7 times 3 is 21. So I do the same to my numerator. 5 times 3 is 15. Since I'm adding same signs, I'm going to add and keep the sign. So 7 plus 15 is going to be 22. Over, and along my denominator, 21. So I have a negative 22 over 21. That's improper. So I know I can get 1 21 out of there with 1 left. So my mixed number from my improper fraction is a negative 1 and 1 over 21. Now I'm going to go back up and get my whole numbers. I have a negative 5 and a negative 2, and I'm going to combine that with my negative 1 and 121. 5 plus 2 plus 1, add and keep the signs, would be a negative 8. Then I just bring along my fraction, 1 over 21. When I'm solving, adding with mixed numbers or fractions, again I want to use some estimation skills to make sure that my answer makes sense. If I have a about -5. And I have about -2, almost -3. My answer should be in between, or should be around 8, and it is. So I know I must be on the right track. We'll do some more practice problems in class. Make sure you have these copied down in your guide.